Okay, we got all of the amazing agents jumping on the call. Thank you so much for being on a Friday. And let me share my computer once again. Okay, does everyone on Zoom, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, the Asian Visual Inspection disclosure forms. Okay, so let's dive into it and get an understanding in how the AVID works. Okay, so this is something that is part of the process for both the buyer agent and also the listing agent. So it's part of the requirements. As an office, compliance is that we want to make sure that the agents understand how to navigate not just additional forms like your purchase agreements or listing agreements, but any other disclosures, including this agent visual inspection. And what it is what it says, right? It's a visual inspection, okay? It's not like you're going to get a hard hat, a ladder, your gloves, and you're going to start going underneath the house, going on top of the roof, and all that fun stuff that agents tend to believe that that's part of the inspection. No, it's a visual inspection, meaning you're just doing a visual inspection. You're not moving furniture, you're not doing any of that stuff. You're just doing a visual inspection and disclosing what you see as part of the process. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So it goes back to the Easton and Strasburger back in 1985. Listing brokers had a duty to buyers to disclose what listing brokers should have known. Fact, visual netted on the hillside was indicated of a slide movement and instability triggering duties to disclose. Okay, so meaning that if an agent knew something about a specific area or specifics that the seller has told us, we have a duty to divulge that information to any potential buyer that is interested in submitting an offer, especially if they're planning to buy the property. Okay, as you can see it in this illustration here, the house on a hillside, right? Kind of reminds us of what's happening up in the hill in the Palos Verdes area right now as we speak. So the duties to inspect and disclose, right? So it creates a broker duty to inspect and disclose, right? No required form of disclosure. It is the duty of a real estate broker or salesperson to a prospecting purchaser of a residential real estate property comprising 1 to 4 dwelling units or a manufactured home to conduct a reasonable, competent, diligent visual inspection. And I'm going to repeat this one more time because I want to make sure that you understand. Reasonable, competent, and diligent visual inspection, okay, of the property offer for sale and to disclose to that buyer, purchaser, all facts materially affecting the value or desirability of the property that is investigated would reveal. So meaning, okay, if you're being told to do a reasonable, right, and competent, meaning you have to have some common sense, right? If you see a big crack or a big stain, right? Is it something that you avoid from putting into your AVID? No, no, right? And I could share with you just in this training room here, there's a bunch of cracks. I will note that as part of my due diligence and to put that into the disclosure as part of my responsibility representing either party, right? One, because let's say we get two different agents, one representing the seller, one representing the buyer, right? I see things a little different than the other agent. Maybe because I've done this more often, I'm more detailed in what I'm putting into these AVIDs, where someone that is fairly new is not putting but very limitation of information. the good thing is the buyer has the ability to see both forms as part of the disclosures, right? And that's provided to both the buyer to sign and also the seller to sign, because the seller has to be in agreement as well of what we are putting as real estate professionals during the AVID process. Now, regarding the transfer disclosure statement, the TDS form created um, eh, by so many things that happened back in the 80s was full transparency and ultimately the responsibility of the seller to disclose any and all things that may impact the buyer's ability to enjoy the property, right? So part of that responsibility is the seller to complete as part of the TDS is section 1 and section 2. Listing agent to complete section 3, and then cooperating buyer agents to complete section 4. Plus, on top of that, there's a section on page 3 of the TDS that an agent visual inspection is also part of this requirement. Okay, so as a listing agent, and I'm gonna wear different hats here, folks. As a listing agent, part of our responsibility is to the seller, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, as part of the process, we have to disclose any and all issues regarding the property if you're aware. If you don't know, you don't disclose. But if you are aware, then you must disclose. That's simple. It's not rocket science, folks. Now, the problem that a lot of sellers believe, and this is why they get themselves in trouble, is the mere fact that they feel that if they disclose, they're going to kill the deal, right? Well, there's a death on the property within 3 years, right? There was a roof leak, right? There was an issue with plumbing, an issue with foundation, right? And they feel that if the buyer is going to do their due diligence, right, isn't that going to be part of the process that they're going to be able to know? Well, no, the answer is no. This is why, and this is most of the issues that we see a lot of litigation is because of non-disclosures. So when you represent a seller, you want to be as full transparent about the conversation, the what we call the hard conversation to have with the seller and say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's for your protection. The more you disclose, the better you are, and the peace of mind that this buyer will not come back and haunt us, meaning want to sue us or question something that you knew and you failed to disclose. Remember, all properties are sold in as-is condition, which is okay. And that's fine. The buyer knows that because part of the process on the purchase agreement says that all properties are sold in as-is condition. But here's the caveat and the issue that we see most agents get themselves in a pickle because their sellers do not understand the initial process of what they need to disclose and not disclose. Okay. I'd rather play the safe section and disclose as much as I possibly know about the property. If you don't know, you don't know. But if you do know, must disclose, in my opinion. Okay? Because I want to be able to sleep well at night, that I did my job as your professional agent. One, to help you sell your home for the highest possible price with the least amount of headaches to net you the most, but also the headache that a lot of people fail to remind themselves is the ability to also not get themselves in a pickle in the near future, because now we're going in through a mediation, arbitration, or a potential lawsuit, and now we get a letter from an attorney saying, hey, we have an issue. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And how we can avoid all this, folks, is very simple. Disclose, 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 right? Remember, when we got into real estate back in whenever, right? It was all about location, 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 right? Now you're in real estate and you have a fiduciary responsibility, is now that mindset should be disclose, disclose, disclose. Okay. That saves everyone from any heartache, but more so, it'll give you the peace of mind that we all want, that, we did everything possible to divulge what we needed from both perspectives. Because again, as a buyer's agent, that you don't know anything about the house, but you did a visual inspection, right? A visual inspection of the property. And it feels good that at least I did my part as well as part of the process, if that makes sense. Okay. And again, just a friendly reminder, if you are on Zoom, please make sure you mute yourselves. Let me go ahead and do that one more time. I apologize. Okay. So again, the components is it's the transfer disclosure statement, the SPQ, which is the seller's what do they call it? The seller's,
Property questionnaire.
thank you, Rosie, thank you. The seller's property questionnaire plus the AVID, which is the agent visual inspection. So the agent visual inspection, which is a supplement, okay, so it's a supplement to the TDS and the SPQ. It coincides with the transfer disclosure, right? Because if you look at the transfer disclosure on residentials up to 4 units, it's a requirement that this AVID is attached to this as part of the buyer and the seller disclosures. The TDS includes optional paragraphs in sections 3 and 4 to add the AVID form for a room-by-room agent disclosures. Now, and we'll go into a little bit more if it's multifamily. Do we have to do a AVID for 2 units, 3 units, or 4 units? And the answer is yes. If you have 3 units, then you have to do 3 different AVIDs, right? Now, some agents will say, well, can't we just coincide everything into one form? You probably could on a duplex. You can say, toggle 1 bedroom from unit 1 and then toggle 2 bedroom number unit 2, but it's going to be a little confusing. To keep it very clean, I say just do 2 AVIDs and save the headache of the confusion in the future, right? I would say just do AVID A for unit B and AVID 1 for unit A as an example. So the AVID on page 1 identifies the action the agent will not do. Okay, so we're going to go into what you need to do and what you're not supposed to do. No offsites, no public records, no common areas, roof or attics, no inaccessible areas such as chimneys, behind locked doors, under rugs, or furniture, okay? Put buyers on notice of buyer's own duty, right? We're just doing a visual inspection, folks. You walk the room, you're looking and you're going up, down, centers, right, left, and just looking at the property. That's all. We're not moving furniture, right, to see what's behind the furniture. Okay, that's not what we're doing. We're not picking up anything because that's a liability too, folks. Okay, God forbid something happens where you accidentally hurt yourself, right? That's not what we want. We just want you to do a visual inspection of the property. That's it. And if there's something that still may seem that is a bit of concern, note it. Okay. Remember, you're not experts in underground basements and all that fun stuff, roofs, as an example, electrical. But what you can is something looks a little off there, and I'm going to note it on my AVID and let the buyer and the seller determine what the next step is. It's not our job to do so, if that makes sense. Yes.
Can you like, for example, see this calibration? Can you mention that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because that discoloration can be many things. I drink tea every morning, and if I spill this tea, guess what? There's going to be some discoloration because this tea is green. I'm going to note it down. I don't know if that's mold. I'm not going to say it's mold. I'm just see and we're going to talk a little bit about how do we disclose that information and be very neutral, because we don't want to kill the deal because we think it's this and we assume it's this when the reality may not even be that. It may be tea that was accidentally spilled by one of the parents, as an example. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So then page 2 goes into use AVID to make disclosure for the following inspections. All paragraphs should have a marking, even if NA, only 2 bedrooms. So, because on this, I think it has 3 or 4 bedrooms. Don't leave it blank. If the property has 2 bedrooms, that's fine. Then the rest, just make sure that you put NA on there. One is because you're telling the buyer and you're telling the seller, hey, this is what I noticed. I only see 2 bedrooms. We don't know any other modifications or any added additions were done. And let's say they locked it, right, as an example, but I'm basing it what I see on the tax records, right? And it shows that it's a 2 bedroom or 2 bedroom, 2 bath, right? This is why you want to start asking questions. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I see that there's this closed room. What is that, right? Okay, well, then they can explain it. Remember, it's just an agent visual inspection. Indicate noted if no defects detected. Okay, so be specific. Don't be vague about how you put it. And you can see that most of this form has a lot of lines in it, right? A lot of lines in it. Okay, so you want to make sure that that you don't leave anything and be so vague, because then it's questionable. Because what did I say early on, right? You're doing a visual, but you're also competent, right? So remember that, because if you ever have to go to court and there's attorneys involved and they realize that, this is common sense, but because you were not specific about it, they may see that as a failure on your part, and it may compromise your position because you're a licensed professional at the end of the day, right? So there's some reasonable competent in this process of what you're supposed to do. And you can't say, well, I didn't know better. Well, I think you do, so keep that in mind. I believe we have some questions on chat. Let's see here. So I know it's a visual inspection, but should we note any noticeable smell? Absolutely. 100%. Yes. If the seller is not disclosing as part of their TDS and SBQ and you smell a foul odor or something, it can be because they have a lot of pets. Maybe they have cats and the cats urinate inside the house. And I've been in homes that are pretty bad. So, yeah, you want to note all of that because, again, what you're doing is protecting yourself from disclosing what you visually see and also hear and also smell. Okay. So if there is sound, let's say that you hear the train, you can note it on the agent visual inspection because there's a section of other. What other things can you note here? It's not just bedrooms, it's not just hallways, it's not just kitchen, it's not just garage, it's not just bathrooms. There can be other factors that may potentially alter the buyer's decision to move forward or not. Okay, because maybe the seller doesn't know, but you saw it or you smell it or hear it. Okay, and that can give the buyer a better decision to move forward or not. Miguel, I hope that kind of answers your question. So Robert has another question. Have you considered adding broker level clauses to zip forms for agents to use? This would ensure consistency, save time, and help with compliance where we can get a list of forms and others in consideration. So templates should have. You know, I've thought about it many, many years ago, and that's a great question, Robert, where you can use sample. But the problem is, with these forms are constantly changing. I don't want to put something that now comes back and says, well, Simon put this in writing, right? So in essence is I probably wouldn't do that because there's just so many agents that may interpret it a little different. So I get your point, Robert, in this, but there's a lot of videos on the agent visual inspections, on the transfer disclosure statements, on the seller's questionnaire, SBQ form, that they have their own thoughts and views in how they see these forms. So in essence, there's ways of gathering this information. Also, if you're a member of the California Association of Realtors and you type in, AVID, there's resources and specifics to this particular form that you can use as a reference as well. Then Rosie has a question. We shall all include any legal disputes and issues the owner had with the neighbors when the seller disclosed to us as their agent, and we encouraged the seller to include it on the TDS SBQ. I had a situation where the seller told me, but she did not want to disclose it. I advised her to do it to avoid any liability, and she agreed, and I also disclosed it in the AVID. Again, yeah, and remember the pros and cons and how you navigate this is vital and crucial, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be in a compromised position that now it opens up a can of worms, right? That now we're dragged into a potential litigation, right? So if you have doubts or have some questions, before you get it out for signatures, bring it to my attention, bring it to your team leader's attention, and get just further thoughts around it, before it gets sent out, because maybe we can adjust it, maybe we can tweak it, or we can help you maybe be more specific in how you can address it without ultimately compromise. Because remember, the seller is the responsible party to disclose any and all regarding the property. Okay, we're just doing a visual of what we see, and also some of the specifics that we still may be able to get around with it is the essence of um, what we hear and what we also smell too, right? Because maybe there's something that triggers something and we don't know. I'll give you another example. A property that was needed some renovations and it was in bad condition and there was a really foul odor, right? And as part of the process, I said there was a foul odor. Well, apparently there was a dead cat that unfortunately passed away underneath the house, and that odor was coming up the house, right? And it wasn't until someone actually went down underneath the house that realized that there was a cat that had passed away. And that was kind of the angle that as soon as you removed it, then there was no foul odor. So some of that stuff will have, because, in essence, when the buyer's going through the process of buying a property, they're going to make a decision, what type of odor is it? Sewer? Is it something else? Well, in this instance, it was a dead cat that was underneath the house. And it happens. Cats unfortunately go under the house because many variables, right? Shelter, maybe it's warm, or sometimes they take their preys in there and they eat their food there. So there's so many things that reason that there is dead animals underneath the house, as an example. All right. Yeah, Ellen. Yeah, can I make a suggestion? Absolutely, please.
Hi, good morning, Simon. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I hope everybody stays dry. And with that, I wanted to make a
Thank
suggestion.
you.
I've used over the last couple of years the glide form for AVID. It is a step by step. It takes you through every room, and it gives you the opportunity not only to make notes, but to actually take a picture. And
That's right.
a picture, sometimes they say it's worth 1,000 words.
That's
It's
right.
made for a reason. And sometimes when you take pictures, it opens up also your mind to, okay, well, what could this possibly uh, trigger later? So you want to disclose it now, and this way you kind of cover your bases. That's my first suggestion. And plus, it looks very professional when you send it to the other agent or when you send it to your own client. It comes off as 5 or 6 or 7 pages. 2 or 3 of them are all photographs. and it shows that you did your due diligence. So nobody can tell you later on if something does transpire, hey, you know what, this agent didn't take their time or they weren't diligent in their inspection. So that's my suggestion.
100%. Well, you're reading my mind, Alan, because that was going to be part of the presentation is that, now part of Glide has where you can upload photos. So start taking photos and it makes it so much easier because trust me, agents don't go to do a visual inspection and have their AVID ready to write. They're not there with their pen and form ready to write all of what they see. But when you take photos of everything that you see as part of the process, upload it, it looks more presentable, but more so, it shows your professionalism. It shows that you took the time to do your due diligence as protection to your client, right? If it's the buyer and the seller, because maybe the seller didn't know because they don't live in the property, but you went in and looked at this, that may alert them to take care of it or evaluate the situation. That's why we do what we do, right? So going back to this slide here, remember, and I've seen AVIDs that are completely blank. It's like, what's the point in having this form if you didn't even do anything to the form? Very vague, and it's questionable, right? Well, it's not my job. It's the seller's responsibility. I understand that. But guess what? When this hits the fan, and when it does, they're going to drag you regardless of what you put or not put in this form because you were the one that ultimately represented one or the other party, right? The buyer or the seller. So guess what? You're going to be hooked and dragged into a potential litigation. I'd rather be protected that I did my very, very best, provided as much of what I know about what I saw, and peace of mind that if I have to, in front of an attorney, in front of a mediator or an arbitrator, that I did what I needed to do as part of my responsibility. That's simple. But as it says here, all paragraphs should have a marking, even if it's NA. So if you know that it's only 2 bedrooms and not 3, then on the third one, just put NA, indicating nothing noted, right? If there's nothing that you see significant that you believe should not be included, then just put nothing to note on there, right? I don't see any major issues with it. All right, so observe or known conditions. Okay, this goes now to the sounds, right? Obviously, you guys see a photo, right? What do you see?
And
All right, you see a plane, right? But what else do you see with this? Well, you see the house. But look how close that house to that plane is, right? That looks like that plane is taking off from the airport and it's just taking off, right?
It looks like all segundo houses.
Exactly. Yeah, this was a funny photo to me. It's like you're on the runway, you see the houses, we need a lift. That's the way it's like, man, I would not want to be that house. So let's talk about conditions. All right. So agents have a duty to reveal any known material or defects. Okay. Again, let me make sure you understand. Agents has a duty to reveal any known material fact or defects. So if someone says something to you, you have an obligation, ladies and gentlemen, to reveal and to know that it is a vital component to the process to provide this material fact or defect. So if someone says it, then, and it's factual, then it's your job to do so. Just like what you said earlier, Rosie, about your position. Okay. Consider noise issues, right? Odors near factories, facilities, or animals or farm, for example, right? We just talked about it. That is all part of that process, ladies and gentlemen. And there's areas where it has like the refineries, right? The sewer place, the landfill, that sometimes there's some type of odor, right? Divulge and disclose. Well, I don't want the buyer to know all this from the seller, right? Well, they're gonna smell it. And that can be a position for them. Well, the seller didn't disclose. I get it, but that still may open up a can of worms that they were not divulged that information, even though they may have physically done their inspections and realized that may still drag you into potential litigation, folks. So disclose, 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 in my opinion.
Include
we got-
train noise.
Say again?
Include train noise.
Yeah, exactly. Trains, if the property is near a high school, what happens on Friday evenings? Yeah, you got football, you got tournaments, you got a lot of stuff, right? If it's a specific area where there's a lot of parties or events, right? Dogs that bark, parties. Okay,
Christmas lighting in December.
100%. Yeah, there you go, Rosie. So you've done a few of these AVIDs.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Okay, suggestions. So Robert, does Glide allow you to add the captions to your iPhone pics to include on your Avid? I believe it does, yes. For those who are not familiar with Glide and how do we access that? All right, so part of that, and I'll show you how you can access. It's well, it used to be part of your member services. Now you get a basic still that CAR provides you as part of Glide. Okay. Helly, you're on here. Awesome. Glide is a system that is provided by most real estate boards when you join. Fantastic. Yes. It is a system that walks through questions by questions in a separate program. After you complete it, they will take your answers and plug them into, 100%. So thank you, Hallie, for providing this information. So absolutely, most of your TCs, have access to Glide. And if you're using a transaction coordinator, guess what? They will provide you with the access to do that as well. The TDS for your clients, the SPQ for your clients, and the Avid as well, where you can upload all of the image. And it just looks really professional too, that you went above and beyond on your Avid. Glide can be easily added to Recenter, absolutely. Kendra says you will want to download Glide to your iPhone. It is an app, okay? You will use it for the Avid on site and then come home and go through glide.com. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple avenues and how powerful that platform is. It really just peace of mind. And what's so cool about that from a buyer and also from a seller on Glide is when it comes to disclosures and helps you navigate the disclosure process is that there's suggestions and guidance in how to properly put things together and the language that you can use to potentially diffuse a potential liability in the near future as well. Thank you everyone for adding your tidbits on this. All right, so sounds near airports or air base, for example, right? As we explained it, right? If your property is near the LAX, if it's near the Hawthorne Airport, right? If it's near a freeway, right? My parents have a home that is adjacent to the freeway. So we hear the constant freeway. As a matter of fact, there's vibration sometimes. When I was a kid growing up, my room was facing the back and it felt like an earthquake, but it was the freeway with the semi trucks going 100 miles, right? You can feel it move, right? I would disclose that if my parents ever decide to sell their home, that's part of the disclosure is that there's sound from the adjacent freeway, and all of that information I would definitely put into my Avid. Duties to inspect, including accessible and visual exterior walls, but not necessarily roofs, right? Again, you're not going to get a ladder. You're not going to say, well, part of my job, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is to go up on the roof, or the buyer saying, I'm going to go on the roof just to visually look for any significant issues that may ultimately alter or compromise your position, right? That's not our job. This is why they hire professionals, right? Home inspectors, contractors, handymans. Let them do all of the heavy lifting for you. You're just doing a visual, listening for anything or smelling anything that may be unusual that you can put as part of the process. Make sense? Any questions so far on this? All right, so now we're going to go into how to properly disclose something. Okay. So please take a note on this because I think this is important and very vital. Identify what's visible. Do not speculate on costs. Okay. We never speculate. Okay. If you're not licensed in that field, you don't speculate, right? You don't assume. Okay, because assumption will get you in trouble. Because then they're gonna use that against you and says, well, my agent told me. Okay. And we're not in this type of industry. We're just here to put buyers and sellers and help sell real estate. When you go out of the scope of your expertise, now you're compromising your position and they will take you down, folks. They will. So be very careful of what and how you put these forms together. Okay. And if you have questions, we're here. Okay. Team leaders, brokers, managers, we're all here to support and help navigate these. And if there's something that I believe or someone believes that it's inaccurate, we'll explain to you the reason behind it. Because again, we don't want to compromise and get you into a pickle. All right, so looking at the two images, we're going to start off with the, let's see here, the greenish black discoloration in the kitchen sink. Stain on living, okay, so I got it. All right, so the proper way is to say the one on the top, upper left, right? The wrong way to divulge is mold of the X, Y, and Z variety in the kitchen, right? How do we know it's mold? Just because it's black doesn't necessarily mean it's mold. Maybe it's a mechanic that's washing his or her hand, right? So the best is back discoloration, as we said earlier, right, in the kitchen sink. Look at the image on the right, just below, right? The proper way is staying on living room, ceiling near dining area. That's it. Don't go putting water stain in living room caused by leaky upper level window or bathroom. How do you know that? If you're not living in the property, there's no reason to indicate anything that will compromise your position, folks. Does that make sense? Right? Keep it neutral, but keep it also where you're doing your duty as a professional. Okay? Makes sense? It makes sense to me. Here's another example. All right, look at the upper right image, right? The proper way is uneven floor near entrance to bedroom. Not, it's a 15-degree slope flooring, okay, indicating a shift or slab. How do you know? How do you know this, right? You don't know. But what you can see, yeah, it's an uneven near the entrance to the bedroom, right? That's perfectly fine to disclose because now when the buyer reads this is one, they can see it, or if they don't see it, they can say, okay, it's near the entrance to the bedroom. Okay, well, there's the bedroom. Ah, I see it. Okay, I see it there. Now I can get an evaluation. But when you disclose it as a 15-degree slope floor indicating a shift, that's going to freak them out. And now it's going to be questionable if you have a deal or if you kill the deal. Okay, because during the inspection contingency period, that's when you see most deals fall apart. Okay, it's within that time frame of the 17 days. Once your offer gets accepted, the buyers are doing their due diligence. This is where most of the deals fall apart. right? One, the seller selling the property in his as is condition. Two, the buyer has their right to do any and all inspections, as many inspections. If they want to get 2 inspectors out there, 3 inspectors within their time, that's up to them. They're going to pay for it, but that's up to them. And there's nothing that the seller can do to avoid that, right? Now, after the fact, after the 17 days or the buyer has released it, then the seller respectfully can say, no, you've had your time to do so. Okay? But during, they can do 100 different inspection. It doesn't matter. Does that make sense? All right, look at the bottom photo now. What do you see? You see a big crack, right? Your assumption is what? What's your assumption to that, right? All right, well, the wrong way is a large or small structural or cosmetic crack caused by earthquake or a bad paint job. How do we know it was an earthquake? It could have been someone that ran into the wall, right, and started that crack. We don't know, right? So the best way to navigate this is crack in second bedroom near basement board. That's it. Simple. It's not our job to evaluate how that crack happened. We don't know. It could have been it existed from previous owners, and the current owner just never did anything about it, and that's okay. But it's not our job to assume, which we believe it is, right? We can assume that it's probably due to an earthquake, a shift, right? Or just bad material on the drywall, but that's significant. That's a huge crack, right? But the proper way is crack in second bedroom near baseboard. That's it. Don't overcomplicate it.
So baseball is that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. All right, we have a couple more questions. All right, so I saw a property on the other day whereby the tenant told me that the car raised all the time nearby. Should we also disclose something like this? Here it is. And that's a good question, you know, and I want to get everyone's participation on this question because I think it's a good question. Is if someone says to you, hey, I got a neighbor that has a Lamborghini at 5 in the morning. It starts up and it rattles and it makes all this sound, right? And I know it's Monday to Friday, every day, Monday to Friday at 5 o'clock. That's my alarm. And now I'm selling the property, right? Do you believe that that's something that we must disclose? Or as an example, you hear, someone in a motorcycle, zooming and make this crazy loud sound. Is that something that we must disclose?
Definitely.
Okay, so some say yes, some say no. Okay. Well, if we go back to the couple images earlier, we talked about a plane, right? And what does planes do? They make noise. Yeah. Okay. They make noise. They also have jet fuel, and sometimes you can smell the exhaust of the jet fuel. I would also say that too. All of that. Again, look at the bigger picture, ladies and gentlemen. What I mean is divulge and disclose anything that may impact the buyer's decision to buy this property. Some buyers may care less. They just want this property because of location, because of amenities, or heck, maybe it's the price that they can afford and they want to live here and they're okay with all that. So don't think in your head that people will not buy because what's around the property. Noise, sound, right? Smell, or conditions, right? Divulge and disclose everything. So to answer your question, I would definitely disclose the cars that are racing. That's a material fact, because if I'm a person that works early morning shifts and I get home at 8 o'clock in the morning and I sleep for 8 hours and all of this sound is happening, I want to know, because that would alter my decision to buy this particular property because of that. And it may be temporary, right? But still, you gotta consider at the moment, because we cannot predict the future, right? We cannot say what's going to happen 2 to 3 5 years, right? These kids may be adults, they may not be racing, but that's not our responsibility. Of what if in the future is what now, what's happening now that may jeopardize the desirability of someone moving into this particular property. So remember, there's two parts to this, ladies and gentlemen. One is the physical of the property, but it's also the surrounding area of the property, right? It may not be the house, it may not be the lot, but what's the property surrounding, right? That's the key. Maybe it's a bus station, right? Around the corner, right? It can be industrial, it can be a retail, it could be so many different things that I believe we have to divulge that information. Now, again, and what I mean by this is you have to educate your clients because they have a duty as well as part of their disclosure. Okay. And your job is to look at the TDS and the SPQ before it gets sent over to the other opposing agent for their client's review, to make sure that what you have or what you know is in alignment of what the seller is stipulating on that. And if there's anything missing, then I would encourage the seller, hey, just again, I think we need to add this. And if you don't add it, I'm going to have to add it in a AVID or in an addendum to the buyer. Because again, I don't want to be in the mix of a potential liability, because we fail to disclose when we should have disclosed because the seller doesn't want to kill the deal. Okay. Well, I'd rather kill the deal than be in a lawsuit, because time wasted, and monetary as well. Okay. So look at all of those elements, folks, when making a decision. All right, do you recommend that an agent just note defects, or should the agent also note other aspects of the property like wood-like floorings in living room, carpet? No, 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 no. We're not going to go that deep in details, okay? It's only concerning things. I could care less if they have a carpet. I could care less if it's a shag carpet from the 70s or 60s, right? It doesn't matter to me. No, it doesn't matter. What matters to me is if that carpet is torn, okay? If the carpet has significant stains in one area, right? That's what I'm going to note. Not the type of flooring, because that goes back to me going up on the roof and saying, well, it looks like it's a tile or composition roof. No, that's not our job. But if I see a significant issue with one of the tiles that is lifted, I'm gonna probably take a photo of it and say that on the upper left section of the property, there's a tile that is upward. And that's it. I'm not saying that you're gonna go up, but if I see it when I'm walking into the house, let's say that that's the door, I see the roof and I see a tile that is sticking up like this, right? And all of the tiles are like this. I'm going to note that. I'm going to take a photo. I'm going to even zoom and say, look, this is what I saw as I'm doing my visual. 100%. It's very noticeable. Not that I'm climbing up to the top, right? But I'm taking what I see.
Right. No, Simon, what I meant, thanks for answering. What I meant is, let's say if you're walking into a total remodel property and you're walking into the kitchen and everything is upgraded and brand new, do you recommend the agent to mention, because it's part of the kitchen, to mention that, hey, kitchen seems upgraded, or do you want us to just strictly note the defects? If there's no defects in the
No.
kitchen, to say nothing.
No, not part of your AVID. Because remember, on the MLS, that listing agent would probably already have information. The seller, who may be an investor, typically will probably say that the kitchen, that's not our job to divulge that. That's the seller's responsibility. But I get your point, Ellen. It's a good, valid point. But no, we as real estate agents do not have to put that information, because we know that it's been upgraded, but it's not our job to define that, right? It's typically the seller and the listing agent. Let's say that we represent the buyer in this. Let the listing agent note it on their information. Because sometimes agents that list properties are also part owners or investors on flipping property as well. I hope that
Got it. So we're just noting defects strictly,
Yes.
or
Yes.
whatever we hear, whatever sounds.
Anything unusual. Remember,
Yeah.
visual, sound, or smell.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, Robert, has anyone tried the quick fix? Upload an inspection report and they'll provide repair codes. Okay, that's a different conversation, but yes, that's part of what we have as your member services. That if you're representing the buyer, right? Buyer does all of their due diligence, and now they're going to ask for some type of concessions, either credit, fix it, or price reduction. Part of the process when you send out the request of repairs to the seller, the seller may come back and says, well, how do I know what all these cost? You just threw a $10,000 amount, but I need more of a concise breakdown of what all of this is, right? So part of your member services, you can, for an additional cost, get a report that will give you different types of quotes for different specific issues regarding, the inspection. I think I have not used it, but what I believe is you upload the home inspection or any inspection, and based on that inspection report, it'll give you an estimate of what you can provide the seller as part of your request for repairs. Does that make sense? It's called the Quick Fix. It's the and then QWIK Fix. Okay. That's what it's called. All right. It's part of let's see, it's called this one here. The Quick Fix. Turn home inspection reports into repairs quotes for licensed contractors. Now, I think you cannot go directly to the website. You have to go through your portal, through car forms, look up Quick Fix, and then that should take you right where you need to go. Okay? So that's how that works. Okay? All right, so going back here. All right, so risk management tips. Agents complete forms, the TDS and or the AVID for broker companies. There's almost always some defects or deficiency in a property. Pause before selecting the noted deficiency box. Remember, it's best to always divulge more information than not to divulge information. All right, peace of mind. It's just like, because you just never know when this may come back and haunt us, right? And you're not going to remember everything, especially if you do a lot of deals. But what you can remember is what you wrote down on your AVID. And then the office or yourself may have a copy of it from 2 years ago. Oh, yeah, this is what I wrote. Man, I'm glad I wrote that information. So the more you put in there, the best. But not go into the crazy scenario where you're just overly putting stuff that you shouldn't, right? Just what you see, and that's it. All right, so advantage of using the AVID establishes compliance with civil code. If claims is made against broker, an AVID may refresh the agent's memory, as I just said, of the events. In lawsuits may help establish agent credibility. Boom. Okay. So remember what we said earlier, right? You have to have that understanding and be competent in your obligations and responsibility to your client. right? And it doesn't matter who you represent. So make sure that this is part of your constant process, right? That you're adding the specifics to what you see in the bedrooms, the hallways, the garage, the kitchens, the bathroom, the front, the back, anything and everything. Yes, it's sometimes a little tedious, okay? And sometimes agents avoid wanting to do the AVID, but that's your duty and obligation. That's what you need to also understand. This is your job. And lastly, quick guide, agent visual inspection disclosures. There's a Q&A, real estate license duty to inspect residential properties. So if you go through your your California Association of Realtors, that'll take you to, I don't know if it's going to allow me to go in here, but maybe it will. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, so it gives you some Q&A. There's just a lot of information that allows you to kind of understand and how to navigate these particular um, documents. Okay, so with that being said, any final thoughts, questions? Let's see if we have any final questions here. Maybe you can show how to add glide and quick. I unfortunately I don't have time to do that. I have my next appointment here at 11:30. So if anyone else, maybe you can reach out and see if you can. You just go through your California Association of Realtors Real Estate Center hub there, and you should be able to find all of that information. If not, send me an email and I'll be more than happy to have a one-on-one with you and kind of help you navigate that as well.
Hey,
With
Simon,
that, yes.
one last thing, for all the listing agents out there, recommendation is not to sit on the AVID. When you get a listing and your seller has the disclosures ready, get on your AVID and send it all together with the TDS and SPQ. This way, not allowing the buyer's agent or the buyer additional time later on and create delays. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen. And then Homa had, would you state that the tenant report the noise if you haven't experienced a car races while on the property during inspection? Would you state that the tenant reports the noise if you haven't? I'm not sure if I understand your question. Are you saying if it's tenant occupied?
Hi, Simon. This goes back to a question that was asked earlier that a
Oh,
tenant had told the agent that there were,
oh, my apologies. Okay. Got it, got it, got it.
but if you don't experience it while you're there,
Yeah, got it.
would you still report it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely report it.
No, so
Thank
you would say the tenant said so, right?
Say again?
So I think her question was like, so you would say the tenant informed me that there's that a race is going on. You wouldn't.
Yeah, you want to get where you got that information
Okay.
from. Yeah, if it was the seller, if it was a tenant, if it was the neighbor, you want to emphasize where you got this information because again, if we have to go into court or we get subpoena, they're going to ask you, well, how did you get this information? Well, the tenant of unit B told me, or the
Got
tenant
it.
in question. So yes, because remember, if you ever have to go into a lawsuit or court, you don't remember what happened a year or 2 years ago. This is the reason that you jot down where the resource came from. Make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Very good. All right, team. Well, that concludes. I apologize for going 1 minute over my time. I hope this presentation was informative. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. With that, enjoy your weekend. Be safe, stay dry, and I will see you on the next